I sold it for $400,000, so I'm going abroad on a trip with my lover. Hearing Nick's unusually cheerful voice, I instinctively asked, "What?" He called during his hospital stay and said, "I sold the house for $400,000. I thought, what does that mean? That house was the precious one I took over from my father. And to openly declare having a lover, that's insane." "What do you mean?" "You sold the house, but what about Sarah?" When I mentioned our daughter's name, Nick scoffed and said, "Humph. That brat. I've always found her annoying. She has an attitude of making light of grown-ups. Of course, I'm leaving her behind." What a thing to say about his own daughter. I felt like I was going crazy with anger and shock at him declaring he sold our house and was fleeing with his lover. Somehow I must stop Nick. Even if he says he sold the house, it can't be handed over that quickly. I must stop him somehow. My name is Angela Hansen. I'm a 39-year-old homemaker. I wish I could say I live happily with my husband, Nick, 1 year older than me, and our 9-year-old daughter, Sarah, but that's far from the truth with Nick. Since we got married, his personality has gradually twisted. And I suspect he has been cheating for about a year now. I have no proof, so I haven't been able to do anything. But Nick hasn't been trying very hard to hide his infidelity. Nick works at an auto parts factory and goes out drinking somewhere 4 or 5 days a week after work. While it could be with his coworkers, he didn't go out nearly as often until a year ago. Moreover, when he comes home, I can smell a unique perfume on him. And he has been preparing expensive bags and shoes that I've never seen before. Of course, he doesn't give them to me, and he just takes the presents and goes out. I'm too scared to confront him about his cheating. So I haven't been able to take any action until I have proof. The Nick I first met seems like a completely different person. Nick and I met 10 years ago, and after dating for a year, we got married. I was attracted to his kind and gentlemanly demeanor, and before I knew it, I had fallen in love. He proposed to me on our 1-year dating anniversary, and we registered our marriage. And soon our daughter Sarah was born. From the outside, it seemed like a very happy marriage. Yet why has it come to this? It all started when Sarah was about 1 year old. As she turned 1 and became more active, moving around and rummaging through things in the house, parenting became even more challenging. I was a full-time homemaker and took care of her all day. But sometimes I couldn't manage alone, and I started asking Nick, who was tired from work, to help with baths and meals. At first, perhaps because he had a sense of being a father, he cooperated with the childcare as I asked, but as it continued every day, he gradually began to dislike it and stopped wanting to be involved. "I've been thinking this, but this is your job, right? You're a stay-at-home mom. So you should be able to handle the childcare alone. Why does a tired me have to help you?" After exploding with complaints, Nick threw those harsh words at me and went to the bedroom alone, leaving me and Sarah in the living room. Sarah, who was in her defiant phase and crying and fussing about putting on pajamas, was hard to calm down, and his words stabbed me in the heart. After that, Nick stopped interacting with Sarah altogether. Even on his days off, when Sarah would ask him, "Daddy, play with me," Nick would respond while reading a gambling magazine. "Playing is mommy's job. I'm busy right now." He didn't listen to her feelings at all. When Sarah cried during her defiant phase, Nick would snap, glaring at Sarah and me alternately. "Hey, don't cry over something like this. Angela, what kind of parenting are you doing? A stay-at-home mom who can't even handle childcare is useless." I didn't want Sarah to hear her father's verbal abuse, so I returned to the room with her. And we had no choice but to play together. Even I had moments when I wanted to enjoy my hobbies, like reading books and watching movies. But living with my daughter glued to me, I had virtually no time for myself. And yet, Nick was enjoying his hobby of gambling, while I had to endure his verbal abuse, which was unfair. But since our household was supported by his earnings, I couldn't complain. If Nick wasn't there, I wouldn't be able to feed Sarah by myself. I was also angry with myself for being so helpless. That's why Nick lived as he pleased, uninterested in parenting. It's been 8 years since then, and Sarah is now 9 years old. Nick's verbal abuse hasn't stopped. And the kind Nick from before our marriage is nowhere to be seen. I lived with Nick just to support Sarah, trying as much as possible not to provoke him. Mom, you're good at drawing, so you should get a job doing that. One day, while Sarah and I were drawing together, she suddenly said that. Oh, a job drawing?
Yeah.
Because Mom's drawings are gentle and really wonderful. She laughed cheerfully as she looked at the animal illustrations I had drawn. I've always loved drawing, and I once aimed to be a cartoon artist. I realized partway through that the path to becoming a cartoon artist was impossible and gave up. But I still draw illustrations as a hobby. I always show your drawings to Megan and Kristen, and they say they're amazing. They're envious of having a mom who can draw such pictures. Despite her father, Nick, being twisted, Sarah grew up honest and straightforward. She's cheerful and the complete opposite of my gloomy self. She seems to have many friends at school and is favored by her teachers. Feeling proud that Sarah appreciated my drawings gave me confidence. Thank you. I'm happy to hear that. As I said that, she smiled like a flower blooming. If she smiles, I feel like I can keep enduring this life. I thought quietly to myself. That night, as usual, Nick came home drunk and collapsed in the living room the moment he returned. Completely intoxicated. His drinking habits have become a serious concern recently. I sighed as I took his jacket off him where he lay and checked his pockets. What is this? Usually, his pockets would contain nothing more than keys. But this time, a piece of paper fell out, and I stared at it intently. It was clearly a receipt with the name of a hotel written on it. This is definitely proof. Until now, I had only vaguely suspected infidelity, but here was physical evidence. I managed to calm my fluttering heart and quietly placed the receipt on the shelf. Then, I started thinking about how to confront Nick. The next day, with half the alcohol still in his system, Nick left the house. Sarah went off to school, and I did my usual household chores. But I couldn't get the receipt from yesterday out of my mind. I had been vaguely aware that Nick was cheating, and not confronting him was my choice. However, now that concrete evidence had come out, it was difficult to continue our life as if everything was fine, pretending to be a good couple. Within a week, or maybe even a few days, I wanted to make him admit to his infidelity and apologize. For that, I wondered what to do. As I was lost in thought, my phone vibrated. Who could it be at this time? It was rare to receive a call during the day. I looked at my phone and saw an unknown number. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I answered the call. Hello, is this Mr. Nick Hansen's residence? Yes, it is. Who am I speaking with? This is Central General Hospital. I'm calling you about Mr. Hansen. The call was from the biggest general hospital around. They informed me that Nick had been brought in by ambulance and was undergoing surgery for a kidney disease. They also mentioned that his kidneys were likely to fail, and he would need a transplant. I was confused by the sudden news when the doctor asked, "Are you okay?" Yes. Can a kidney transplant be done? Yes. We will start looking for a donor immediately, and if we find one, we can proceed with the transplant surgery. I see. I was overwhelmed with information. But the doctor continued to explain the details about the transplant surgery. We will check the compatibility with potential candidates, so please be prepared. I only understood about half of what the doctor said. But it was clear that Nick was in a serious condition due to his illness. No matter how much he mocked me or cheated, I didn't want him to lose his life. I hoped he could be saved. That night, I spent all night thinking about his transplant surgery. Weeks passed, and we received the results of the kidney compatibility tests. From potential candidates, basically family members. Surprisingly, I was the most compatible donor. His parents were still alive but in poor health and unable to undergo transplant surgery. Since Nick is an only child, and I was the healthiest and matched his blood type, I was the best candidate. If asked whether I had any hesitation, it would be a lie to say I didn't. However, nothing could replace his life. With that thought, I decided to become the donor for his kidney transplant surgery. I explained Nick's condition and the details of our transplant surgery to Sarah. And she cheerfully said, "I understand. Good luck." While I was hospitalized, Sarah would stay with her grandparents. Despite their poor health, they were mostly able to manage on their own at home. Sarah was happy to go to her grandparents' house because she got along well with them. This way, I can be at peace for a while. I was relieved that Sarah was such a well-behaved child. With that reassurance, I faced the transplant surgery. A week later, I signed the consent form, underwent health checks, and then underwent the kidney transplant surgery for Nick. The surgery was over more quickly than I had expected, and I stayed in the hospital for about a week, while Nick stayed for about 10 days. Fortunately, there were no complications, and the recovery went smoothly. The day before I was to be discharged, I received another call on my phone. Wondering who it could be this time, I answered to hear a familiar voice suddenly say, "It's me." The caller was none other than Nick. I thought he might thank me for being a donor and asked him, "It's been a while. How are you feeling after the surgery?" I had expected him to say something like, "I'm feeling better thanks to you, Angela." "Thank you." However, the words that came through the phone were unexpected. "About our house." Nick paused for a moment. As he suddenly brought up the house, I was taken aback. "I sold it for $400,000, so I'm going abroad with my lover." Hearing his inappropriately cheerful voice, I instinctively asked, "What?" He called during his hospital stay and said, "I sold the house for $400,000. I thought, what does that mean? That house was the precious one I took over from my father. And to openly declare having a lover, that's insane." "What do you mean?" "You sold the house, but what about Sarah?" When I mentioned our daughter's name, Nick scoffed and said, "Humph. That brat. I've always found her annoying. She has an attitude of making light of grown-ups. Of course, I'm leaving her behind." What a thing to say about his own daughter. I felt like I was going crazy with anger and shock at him declaring he sold our house and was fleeing with his lover. Somehow I must stop Nick. Even if he says he sold the house, it can't be handed over that quickly. I must stop him somehow. After saying he sold the house and was going abroad with his lover, the call was abruptly cut off. I sat, bewildered, trying to make sense of what had happened. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't believe that Nick had suddenly sold our house, especially while we were hospitalized. Due to the shock, my condition worsened, and my hospital stay was extended. In my despair, I could do nothing but lie in bed alone, brooding over what would happen next. For now, I should call my daughter. If the house was gone, Sarah and I would have nowhere to return to. It was infuriating that Nick had boldly declared he had a lover. But what concerned me most was Sarah. I called my in-laws home, and my mother-in-law answered. She quickly handed the phone to Sarah. Hello, Sarah? I'm sorry, it looks like my hospital stay has been extended. Are you okay? Are you feeling lonely? And I heard from your father that he sold our house. We've lost our place to return to. Worried about her, I fired questions rapidly. Then she replied cheerfully. Mom, it's okay. I've taken care of it. What? I didn't understand what Sarah meant by she had taken care of it, and I was puzzled. Dad said he asked his lover to sell the house, but actually, Grandma and Grandpa. Sarah told me in detail about what had happened while I was hospitalized. I was astonished to hear that. Unexpected developments had unfolded without my knowledge. So Mom, just rest easy. I'm fine. Thank you. Encouraged by Sarah's responsible words, I was finally able to calm down a bit. However, if Sarah's story was true, I wondered what was happening now with Nick and his lover. I was curious, but I told myself that resting was more important and went to sleep. 3 days later, after I had fully recovered, I was discharged from the hospital and headed to my in-laws' house. Mom, welcome back. Sarah ran towards me with a happy face. Behind her, my mother-in-law squinted her eyes with a smile. That Nick really did something outrageous. I'm sorry, Angela. My father-in-law apologized to me with a stern face. With such wonderful parents, how could Nick have turned out so twisted? No, it's my fault for not speaking up and just following along all this time. You don't need to apologize to me. Thank you. Actually, Angela, there's something I want to tell you. Yes? What is it? I sat down in front of my in-laws, and Sarah and I listened to what they had to say. Although their story surprised me again, my mother-in-law's strong encouragement that we won't let Nick have his way reassured me. Then, on our way home, I saw a familiar face and an unknown woman arguing embarrassingly with a real estate agent in front of an office. It was unmistakably Nick. And the woman with him had to be his lover. He was in a tracksuit with messy hair. And his lover was wearing a short skirt with one high heel and no makeup. Hey, do something. What do you mean the house isn't sold? Right. What about my $400,000? Well, I can't do much. The buyer canceled the purchase last night, so the contract is now void. What? Why cancel? Damn it. Nick stomped around, and his lover shrieked beside him, drawing startled looks from passers-by. Sarah and I were surprised too, but realizing it concerned us, we approached them. What are you doing here? Startled by my sudden appearance, Nick and his lover exclaimed in an absurd tone. What are you doing here? Oh, I get it. You did this, didn't you? You must have persuaded the buyer not to go through with it. What? That's unbelievable. This makes no sense. As they hurled foul words, I subtly shielded Sarah behind me. The real estate agent looked perplexed, so I stepped forward and said, I'm his wife. The agent responded with a stunned "Oh. Are you mocking me with that cancellation? Because of you. We had to turn back right before boarding the plane. And now we can't buy a new house. I even have debts from the money I gave to her. He pointed at his lover. Now it all made sense. He had tried to sell the house I inherited from my late father to pay off the debts from the money he spent on his lover and to buy a new house for them to live in. How selfish. Ignoring Sarah's and my existence, he even tried to take away my most precious asset. Unbelievable. I was trembling with anger. Excuse me, but aren't you the one being disrespectful? What are you doing showing up all of a sudden? You're talking back to me? You can't even eat properly without me. Despite the critical situation, Nick still spewed insults, but I continued. First of all, do you really think you can sell my precious house without consulting me? I'm the owner of that house. Did you forge some documents? And you've been cursing the buyer. But the people who tried to buy the house were your parents. What? What do you mean? Yes. What Sarah told me over the phone while I was hospitalized was that my in-laws pretended to buy my house as a strategy to punish him. My in-laws had heard all about Nick's misdeeds from Sarah and were furious, saying, "It's unthinkable for him to do such things to Angela and our dear granddaughter." Sarah's inherent brightness and honest nature had made my in-laws believe her story over their sons. Let me explain. Grandpa and Grandma knew about Dad and that woman. And they were really angry. I knew Dad was trying to sell the house and I talked to them about it. That house was left to Mom by her dad, and it's too important to just sell off like that. So before anyone else could buy it, Grandpa and Grandma tried to buy it on purpose. Sarah stepped forward and confidently explained the situation. Those two, what are they doing to their own son? Damn old man and old lady. And you too. A kid sticking her nose in, showing how bad her mother's parenting is. Nick, desperate, let out a vulgar laugh. Sarah did not flinch at his attack. I pulled a piece of paper from my bag and thrust it in front of his nose. Sorry, but I'm divorcing you. Seeing the divorce papers, Nick laughed through his nose again. Divorce? You said it? Fine, divorce then. You think you can live without me? Nick thought I, a homemaker, would be lost without him. That might have been true before. But now, I have a secret weapon. I opened my mouth to shatter his shallow thoughts. No need to worry. I'm going to receive a lifetime gift from your parents. Wah, a lifetime gift. What's that? Nick and his lover looked stunned. In fact, this morning I was told by my in-laws about the lifetime gift. My in-laws are in poor health and it's uncertain when they might fall ill. They wanted to give me part of their assets before anything happened. Of course, I initially refused. I thought it should go to Nick. But my in-laws said, we'd rather give it to you, Angela, who gave birth and raised our lovely granddaughter, than to a son who can't even thank her for a kidney donation. I thanked and agreed to accept the lifetime gift from my in-laws. It's your father and mother's wish. They said they wanted to give it to me, not you. Nick's face turned pale. Understandably so. Assets that should have been his were going to his soon-to-be ex-wife. That's filthy. That's not right. Parents' assets should be inherited by their children, right? I'll talk to them now. If they won't listen, I'll take them to court. He glared at me with fiery eyes, screaming. I sighed at his shallow thoughts. Maybe it's time. Shall I deliver the final blow? Stepping forward, I got close to Nick and stared him down and said, "You're talking nonsense. Ultimately, aren't you to blame for disrespecting me and even having an affair? It's your fault for spending the money, right? Your parents' decision is only natural. Besides, do you even have the money to sue? Even if you did sue, how would all your past betrayals look in court?" Nick let out a scream as if squeezed from his throat. Seeing the demonic expression on my face up close, I could tell he was shaking. Sorry, I won't sue. Please forgive me. He desperately apologized, but it was too late. I stared him down fiercely again and delivered my final words. You'll be paying property division and child support. If you can't pay, I'll chase you to the depths of hell. Be prepared. Nick and his lover screamed and ran away. The real estate agent, having witnessed everything, said with a defeated stance, "Thank you. No, I'm truly sorry for the trouble." Feeling uncomfortable staying any longer, I took Sarah's hand and headed home. Mom, you were awesome. So were you, Sarah. Thank you for fighting for Mom. Despite the situation, Sarah's face was smiling. I vowed in my heart to protect this child for life. A few months later, I was able to divorce Nick smoothly. The marriage that I had endured for so long ended with no problems, making it feel anticlimactic. I even wondered why I had tolerated everything until now. Nick, having really poured money into his affair, borrowed money to pay the property division and child support. His lover, saying, "I can't be with a poor man like this," dumped him and left. To add to his misfortune, the company Nick worked for faced a drop in sales due to a shortage of materials, forcing them to cut labor costs. Nick, who worked in the factory, was one of the first to be laid off. While it's sad, it's hard to believe he was laid off for no reason. Probably, the company started with the least productive and poorly behaved employees. Given how he had acted arrogantly at home, he must have behaved similarly towards his subordinates at work. Now, having lost his job, lover, and wife, Nick is just scraping by with part-time work. He has no motivation to look for a new job, settling into a life of working and resting as he pleases, which must be bleak and stagnant. But I had no sympathy left. I had done all I could by giving a part of my kidney to Nick. Still, he scorned me, and it seemed like karma had finally caught up with him. He'd better sweat to pay off his debts now. Meanwhile, making a living from the assets that I inherited from my in-laws, I started working on illustrations, spurred by Sarah's compliment that I was good at drawing. Orders are still few, but my clients say my work is meticulous and skillful. I'm determined to increase my clientele and raise Sarah proudly.